All right, panel in the house. So essentially, this debate is about actors, right? So we want to remove the state as actors from being the ones who choose which groups they will term as extremists, and then we think that international organizations should be the only actors to qualify as those who term groups as extremists. So we'll be engaging the legitimacy of this, why we think international organizations are the ones who are most legitimate to do this, and then the effectiveness as well as the consequences that we get from this. Now, we believe that we're going to be talking about where sovereignty is derived from, because an argument might come about state sovereignty and whether or not this is an impeachment of state sovereignty, and why international organizations are the only ones who have the legitimacy, particularly on issues that affect the world, and how like we call for a global rallying when we use the term extremist on certain groups of people, and then what's like kind of perverse incentives that we get from states to be the ones who tag groups and extremists. And then we think that it's very important that when we want the best actor to tag a group to tag an ideology as an extreme one, it should not be one who has this kind of incentive. So firstly, on the issue of sovereignty, unlike the notion that we get that sovereignty is something that is derived from people or from people that exist within the states, most of the time sovereignty is derived from international bindingness that we get from like international organizations, right? So that's why a country, despite a country cannot just go into another country and like take over like we used to have before, because of the international bindingness that they have in that country. So the point of this is that sovereignty is usually derived from international laws and these international organizations, and then the issue of whether or not they can remove it is something which does not come like in this debate. But more importantly, and this is something which goes on to the characterization of extremist group, when you characterize a group as extremist, there are certain consequences that come as a result of the characterization. So characterization of a group as extremist is one in which like we want to treat the group differently, like we want to tag the ideology as something which is bad, which is an extremist ideology, and we want to say like globally, we want to take a global stance against such ideology. So it's very important that the state should not be one who does this. So I'll be explaining the perverse incentives that we get on the state, like to tag, and how this is very bad for dictatorial regimes. So let's look at how we get like groups as extremists, right? So usually there are different ideologies that we have in the world. There are different ideologies that we have in the world. So when there is an ideology which is not like prevalent in a society, which is not prevalent in a country, or which is not the common ideology, and there's another ideology which they don't like or which they want to fight against, we have the incentive of countries, if they are given the sole power, like to be the ones who call certain groups extremists, to call that ideology which they do not necessarily like an extremist one. And this might become problematic because of the kind of consequences that we get when you tag these groups as extremists. So we think that because of these instances of like perverse incentives, the best actor to call a group extremist is one in which like the motives to tag a group which is against the ideology, a group which accommodates ideology, which are supposed to accommodate ideology from different aspects, because it's an international organization, right? So they have Muslims, they have communists, and they have Democrats, people who practice democratic regime within them. So we think that's the best group to do this. And the group which does not have incentive to witch hunt or to punish a particular group by tagging them extremists is one who has the best, who should be in the best position to do this. Because when you tag a group extremist, of course, that ideology is not something which you're allowed to persist or to exist within that society. You start to fight them, start to look for ways to eliminate them. So a group which can now decide that these are the people that we do not like is not one which should be allowed like to say whether or not a group of people are extremist groups. Yes. Okay.
Yes. Do you believe international organizations totally lack any incentive, like adverse personal gains, to make them wrongly tag groups as extremists?
Of course, the question is not whether or not international organizations lack incentives to do this. As I've said earlier, that because of the kind of power structures that we have that exist within international organizations, there might be incentives to do this. But when we do a weigh up of the incentives, and particularly how it's bad for that kind of society, we see that the state actually has more like worse incentives on their side more than the international organizations, because international organizations in the end cannot really might not really have incentives to punish a particular group as much as the states might have to punish that particular group. So on the way up of incentives, we believe that the state has like more incentives to actually use the tag and punish these guys. But let's look at how this is a global issue, right? Because most people believe that international organizations only have legitimacy when things are done that affects the whole world, right? And we think that when you tag a group extremist, then this becomes a global issue, because there comes a call for a global rallying against that sort of group. So when we see Jehovah's Witnesses in Russia, for example, being tagged as an extremist group within Russia, then it sends a wider message to the entirety of the world and to Jehovah's Witnesses in other places that your activities are becoming extremist, and it sends a message to other people who are not Jehovah's Witnesses as well. And it can also push for other individuals to decide that to look into the activities of these people and see whether or not they are actually extremists in themselves. So we believe that because of the global nature of calling a group extremist, of calling the activities of a certain group extremist, then we should not allow the state to be an actor. We should allow like the organization which has a coalition of different ideologies, of different people, and of different groups to be the ones who like decide whether or not an idea is extremist. And we see like the kind of things that we do. For example, what Israeli does to the Hamas, and we think that this is something which is very, very bad. So when we decide that the best actor to tag a group extremist, or to decide whether or not the ideologies that a group is an extreme one or is moderate or whatever, when we decide that it's an international organization that should be the best, we realize that we get better aims for those groups and also for the society at large, because we think that it's very bad for us to give too much power to the states, because this is what we do in the end, right? So if the state decides that this is a group that we do not like because the ideologies are against us, we further empower them. So we think it's very important that we check the powers of this state, because in the end, if international organizations tag a group as extremist, the states would also be an actor in like trying to kick out this extremist group from their state, or in trying to like curb their activities. But we want a limitation of power for the states. We do not think that we should give them too much power to be the ones who decide the extremist group and who decide like what happens to them and how they implement the things that happens to them. We want a limitation of this, and we think that international organizations are essentially those who are the best actors like to do this. So from opening government, we have told you essentially, firstly, where we get like sovereignty from, and we think that the sovereignty of the states is not superior like to what is derived from international laws. And we think that based on the problematic nature of deciding whether or not a group is bad, and you deciding whether or not like the consequences that the group deserve, we do not want the state to have so much power in doing this. We proudly propose.